Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back. Have you ever had this feeling you said to yourself, or maybe somebody else, I think this place is haunted, whether it's your home or whether you've been somewhere and you just feel a presence. Something is maybe a little off, or maybe you've out of your peripheral vision saw something dart by, or just weird things going on. Maybe there are things happening at a different level. We're going to look at that today with the founder and president of Great States Paranormal, which is a local company that investigates just that, the paranormal. He's Dustin Crowley. He's back with us. Hey, Dustin, how you doing today?
Good, Steve. How are you?
Very well. Very well. So I believe all of us have felt something from time to time. Either we saw something or a light came on or things have happened. And a lot of times we'll just write it off. Just coincidence, or I don't know what's going on there. Is it your feeling that if our intuition is telling us that there is something around us, be it energy, spirit, whatever, it's happening for a reason that we should really pay attention to it?
I mean, it's definitely a good start. If you feel like something might be happening, maybe it is. So it's at least worth looking into. So maybe not. And then, of course, some of us are a lot more in tune to the spirit world than others. And if you are the type that can just walk into a room and feel, oh man, something might have happened here in the past, and you start getting some of these other sensations, and yeah, it might be a better indicator.
Would you say that no matter where we are, what we're doing, there's always spirits around us?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the planet's been around for however many billion years. Generations and generations and generations have come before us. So your house may not be the site of a Civil War battle. It may not be the place where someone has particularly died, but the land, the property, it could have been significant to someone at some point. It could have been maybe where a tree stood and someone carved their initials in it because, like J Hearts S Forever. So there's always at least a chance that we could be near something within the spirit world. Because it's not always necessarily something dark.
Do you feel that when somebody passes, that their energy is around us? It's, they were a part of us. Maybe it's a relative, loved one, that the energy is always around. Whether you call upon
Yes.
it, whether you feel it, it's there.
It absolutely is. There have been many cases of children seeing a grandparent that they never even got to meet and describing that person to a parent, and it lines up perfectly. Or they'll see a picture of a grandparent like years later and be like, "Oh, mommy, that's the person that was sit at the edge of the bed." And it's just an ancestor watching over you. Um, Especially if you had really strong ties and connections to that person. Uh, there are so many instances of spirits staying around after death, just checking in, showing up for family gatherings, just like they would have done in life.
Hmm. Why do you think children are easier to pick up on that stuff? Is it that they're they don't have to deal with the stuff that adults do, all the distractions and everything?
Part of that, yeah, but also I think the main thing is we haven't conditioned them at that point that it's not something to pay attention to. Because I think we all see it, we all sense it, but
Hmm.
we've conditioned ourselves that that's not something I should talk about. I mean, it's kind of like if you live next to an airport, eventually you're not going to hear the airplane.
Right. Yeah, you're so used to it. And then the other part, children aren't afraid to be judged. So if you or
Yep.
I said, "Hey, wait a minute, I think there's something around here," people might look at us like, "Okay, sure." Children's like, "Oh, well, that's cute. Okay, you have a playmate, you have a friend," but they do.
Yeah, same thing with animals too, because I mean,
Hmm.
cats, dogs in particular, they are really known for like staring off into the distance, being more alert to spirits because they don't
Hmm.
know any better. To them, there's just something there. And so, of course, I'm going to stare at this thing.
It's many times one of my two cats will just start jumping around, darting around, like almost following something and make these strange noises that he doesn't make any other time
Mhm.
except when he's chasing something. There's nothing there. It's very bizarre. And I wonder, could he be chasing something?
Could be. I mean, I know our cats do that sometimes. Um, my dog is in the background, apparently. He's had times where he's just growled into an empty closet.
Hmm.
So there are times and they don't necessarily know if something's good or bad. They just see here's maybe this thing that's in my house, that's in my space, and maybe it shouldn't be here. Although, of course, for a cat, it could also just as easily be like a small bug that they're trying to get.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Happens.
And I'm totally understanding of that. But when he's doing his thing, there's nothing around. It's not a one off, a two off. It's and usually in the evening when the lights are out, or down, that's when he kicks into this weird mode of just like darting and then just making this weird noise, not even a meow, and it goes on for like 10 minutes. Um, I don't know what it is. Very bizarre. I would almost think he's chasing something the way he's moving.
Probably when the lights go down and he gets used to seeing in the dark.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, that's one thing that we start most of our public investigations with is teaching people how to look for, smell for, sense for the spirit world. Because it's not like it is in the movies where just this full-bodied apparition comes out of nowhere.
Right.
You got to know what to look for.
And let's talk about some of the things that we should look for or sense to know that yeah, there is a strong potential for there being, I'm not even sure how to phrase this, a ghost or a spirit.
So one of the most prominent signs, and this mainly just because the human body retains this sense the longest, is smell.
Wow.
Predominantly, if you smell maybe a woman's perfume, florals, um, cigar smoke, if you had like an uncle, grandfather that would smoke a cigar or smoke pipe tobacco, those are usually some of the most distinctive signs, especially
Hmm.
because with the human brain, we're usually able to directly connect that
Oh.
to someone or something. Then the other big one is just how you feel and like sensations, especially on your skin. Oftentimes, when you encounter a spirit, you'll feel like you've walked through a spider web. That kind of tingly, unsettling feeling, or like if you've ever hit your funny bone and like your entire arm goes numb, it can be that intense sometimes if it's a particularly strong spirit. But those are two of the more common ones. Um, of course, you've got times where you can hear them, you've got times where you can see them, but those are not nearly as common, mainly because we've conditioned our brains to almost shut that down if we see and hear stuff because we don't want to think that we're crazy. But it's hard for us to shut that down if we smell something or if we feel something.
Are these spirits trying to contact us, trying to get our attention?
Sometimes, sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. Um, if it's someone that was significant to us in life, they might be trying to get in touch with us. But if it's someone that maybe I just moved into their house, they could just be going about their normal daily routine and we just happened to cross paths, and that's when I feel that tingly feeling. But they were just going to the kitchen.
Can you ask for them to make their presence known?
Oh, absolutely. They may not do it, but you can ask. Um, and that can be as simple as using some knocks. I usually do 2 knocks for yes, 1 knock for no.
Hmm.
But you also kind of have to know the place that you're at, because if you are in an older home, sometimes if your radiator kicks on, if there's something with the plumbing, that might rattle on the wall. And then if you have any other pieces of equipment, then you can ask them to use that equipment, and they can usually give you some signs that way. Uh, I know probably one of the quickest and easiest, I don't have any at my desk, but I can use this necklace as an example, would be a pendulum. So you can ask them to just move it, whether that be like sideways, forwards, or backwards as a circle. And really anything that has just a weight on the end of a string, you can use for that.
Hmm.
Um, you have to make sure to keep your arm and your hand extremely still, because sometimes you can kind of give yourself the answer you're looking for, but it's a way without having to spend all the money on like an SB7 spirit box or something like that.
I I've heard that used. It's called muscle testing,
Hmm.
where you can use the pendulum and it will sway in the direction based on your answer. So you give it a true answer or a false answer and see what you get. When you're using it to feel the presence of a spirit or get the evidence of that, would you say, all right, spirit, if you're around me, make yourself known by moving this pendulum to the front or side by side?
Usually, I'll start with just, can you move it? And if it moves at all, then, you know, I might ask, give me your yes, give me your no, or move it forward and backwards for yes, move it side to side for no. And then just kind of go from there and see what happens or what doesn't happen. Um, and depending on where you are, like if we are at a more popular location, sometimes you don't really even have to explain to the spirits how to use anything to communicate with. But if you're at like a private home and you're the first person in, you usually have to explain to the spirits and even the homeowners, this is what this does, this is how it's used, this is maybe how you can detect if it's a false positive. Um, because basically everyone outside of the team is having to learn how to use it and observe it for the first time.
Are those spirits aware of what's going on around us, the conversations we're having, all of that?
Sometimes um, there's times where they are, and then there's times where they're not. Typically, if they are more tied to the place that they're stuck or the place that they choose to be, then they will pay attention more to what's being said and done around them. If they're not so much tied or stuck there, they're just in limbo, or it's not a place that was particularly important to them, then they tend not to really care.
We might have touched upon this, but it's come up in conversation around me recently. Um, Spirits that are stuck that didn't make it over to the other side. Why would they have not transitioned over? Is it, they didn't do the right thing? I've heard that is a thing where they're and they could be stuck there for centuries, or it could be a week, whatever it might be.
So the most common reason would probably be fear.
Huh.
Because after passing, you've got the choice. Do I want to go on? Do I want to try and stay in this limbo? And if you don't know what the next phase of your existence is going to be, especially if you come from a strong Judeo-Christian background and you don't know if you're going to go to a heaven or a hell. Being stuck in limbo is better than one of the alternatives.
Right. Hmm.
And if you think you might have unfinished business, well, I didn't make amends with Uncle John, and we were having that really bad argument. I don't know if that's going to cause me to get sent to the wrong place. I'll just stay here as long as I can.
Wow. Can you take us on a journey and maybe one of the locations that you've sensed paranormal activity and what it was like?
Sure. So, um, I'll use the example of the place I actually currently work, because I'm also a historian with a local historical association. And one of the places I work now is a place that we've hosted ghost hunts at a good bit in the past. So we went to just a typical Halloween event where they were telling some local ghost stories, and you could just sense the presences in the house. And so, uh, post-pandemic, talking to the organization and seeing what we could do to help them, we started conducting a couple of investigations. And just as you walk through, you can feel just the presence of some of the entities. The most
Wow.
notorious one for that location is actually the second owner of the house. She was a woman, which is unheard of for a woman to own a house in this was 1892, but she was very wealthy, and she was very particular about everything having to be done the proper way. Because even though it was towards the end of the Victorian era, and she technically lived until 1916, which puts you well into the Edwardian time, she still considered herself to be a proper Victorian lady.
Hmm.
So all of those rules and customs she would very strictly maintain. So when you're in her presence, you feel almost like you have to stand up straighter. You have to be more proper. It's hard to really describe unless you've been in the presence of a really demanding personality person. But you know when you are, and almost like the hair stands up on your arms. And for her in particular, one thing that we've noticed a lot over the years is if the house isn't in her liking, she will let you know. She has locked the previous site manager in the basement before. She has flung open all of the cabinet doors in the kitchen. She has had lights flickering on and off. Um, Recently, I even had to replace a light switch, a light bulb, test the cord going to the light outlet with an electricity measuring tool. And it was to the point where I was about to have to like work with the financial director to be like, okay, we need to get an electrician in to replace this completely. And it was all because there was a party that was held there and it had a lot of glitter involved. And I don't know if you've ever been around glitter. It's impossible to get up all the way. She was not a fan.
So there was oh, whoa. So there was a party there, in the last number of years, whatever, where glitter was used, and she was not happy with that spread around her house.
Yep. I mean, it was mainly just on the participants' dresses,
Okay.
but it's glitter.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I
gonna get everywhere.
I gotcha. I would be
And
unhappy too.
I'm still cleaning it up even to this day.
Wow. Have have you ever been in a situation uh during an investigation where you were uncomfortable? Well, like, this is creepy. Um, maybe I shouldn't stay here much longer. Like any feelings of just
Sort of.
uneasiness.
So it was at um a mansion up in Kentucky, and I was actually leading a public investigation for another company at this time. And throughout the course of the evening, the door got locked and we were all locked outside. So, for one, we were told recently that there was a pregnant, I want to say, bobcat in the area. And for everyone to be locked outside with potentially pregnant bobcat,
Hmm.
kind of an issue. But then even once we got back in the house later, and the only way to lock and unlock the door was you had to put the key in, turn the key, and that was to lock it or unlock it because it was the pre-Civil War era home. And even reviewing the cameras, you see all of us leave, close the door, no one locks it. And then obviously we can't get back in. So it was a pretty unique experience. But the
Wow.
part that was probably the most unsettling would be later that evening, probably around 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. We were using the device and growling noises started coming through the device, which for me personally, I'm not too concerned just because of my extensive past working with demonic entities. But it's different when I've got, 15, 20 people who are just paying guests, and some of them it's the first time they've ever been on a paranormal investigation ever, and trying to make sure that they stay safe while still not causing them panic. Because obviously, if me as an expert in the demonic, if I start to panic, they're going to panic.
Sure.
So that was probably the most unsettling experience I've had while on an investigation.
Wow. We have just a minute left. Do you bring any specific tools when you're on site?
Yes. So we usually have some electromagnetic field monitoring devices. We have dowsing rods, pendulums, spirit boxes. We usually have some temperature gauges. Pretty much, if you've seen it on TV, we have it. And then if there's other just odd and ends that we might have just for additional scientific measuring, we usually have some stuff like that as well.
Have you ever, that was going to be the final question, but now I have another one. Um, have you ever taken pictures and seen orbs?
Yes. In fact, I've got a picture and I might try to send this to you so we can look at it next time. I've got a picture on my phone where we actually captured a full-bodied apparition. Um, it was taken while we were just taking a picture of a theater because I'm on the board of directors. I'm actually currently the president of that theater, and one of the shows left the auditorium in a mess. And so I was just taking a picture to send to the directors. And someone later on that night was looking at it and they're like, by the way, who's in the door back here? It's like, no one. It was just me and one other person, and she was behind me.
Wow.
And yeah, I'll send it to you when I find it because it is chilling.
Love to see it. And even if you could put it on your screen there and do a screen share, you could just bring it up and we can see it that way too.
Let me see if I've got it on the computer because I might.
Well, we're
Trying to,
just about out of time. So maybe we should save it for next time and dig deep into it. I might even have some orb picks myself that I've always wondered about.
you know, that's actually good. Let's save it for next time,
Sure.
and I'll put that up along with some of my other pictures I've taken.
Oh, that'd be great.
And we can look at some of yours, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. How do we find you? If somebody wants an investigation, has questions, whatever it might be, how do they locate you?
You can find me at greatstateparanormal.com. You can also follow me at Instagram and on Facebook at Great State Paranormal.
Super cool. Great talking with you again, Dustin. We'll catch up next time. Thanks.
Absolutely. See you.
Appreciate it. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.